Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to Season 2 of the Primetime Rundown interview series powered by Streamyard. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We are blessed to have with us the radio voice of the Ottawa Senators on TSN 1200 in Ottawa, Canada, just north of the border, Dean Brown. Dean, how are you? And thank you so much for joining me here on this Monday night.
I'm doing well. Thanks, Joey, and thanks for having me.
Of course, absolutely. So it is, as we did say, season number 2. This is the first episode ever on StreamYard. We usually have it on Zoom, but you are the first guest to debut the new graphics here, so it's pretty cool. Just to give all of our new guests who are just joining in on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you may be watching from, Dean is actually the 4th radio play-by-play guy in the NHL that we have had on. Chris King for the New York Islanders, Dan Rusanowski, another one. We actually had also Anthony LaPanta on from Fox Sports, so he's a television. And now Dean Brown, you are the 4th. So let's get to it. We actually listened to, as I was prepping for this, I listened to a couple of podcasts that you were on, and the coolest thing that I found out about it was that you don't have a resume, and that probably, Dean, is the coolest thing as an up-and-coming broadcaster, where if you don't have a resume, the door is that way. So give us a little bit of background about how you got started out of, obviously you were born in St. Boniface, Manitoba, and the same town as Jonathan Toews and Butch Goring.
Yeah, it's St. Boniface is a suburb of Winnipeg, where the Winnipeg Jets are. And I was born there, but grew up in a little farming town by and large, just outside of Winnipeg. It's funny when I speak at broadcasting schools or journalism schools, I always tell the young aspiring broadcasters and journalists that you can't expect to be as lucky as I have been, because I am about as lucky as you can get. You're right. It's not that I don't have a resume. Well, actually, it is that I don't have a resume. I don't have a resume because I've never applied for a job. In broadcasting, I've never applied for a job. I've just been stupid luck, always been at the right place at the right time, and have been offered every job I've ever had, and I never went to school for it. I was interviewed after a football game, actually. I grew up playing, like all the normal stuff, hockey, football, rugby, baseball, all the things you play when you're growing up. And I had just played a football game, and I got interviewed by a radio guy in Winnipeg. And he asked me if I ever thought about going into broadcasting. And I said, well, I plan on being a professional football player, so that's really not on my radar. But I wasn't good enough, and I broke my back, which are two super negatives. Yeah. The next season, actually, he interviewed me again and said the same thing. And I said, well, at that time, I was enrolled. I was planning to go to the University of Winnipeg and just go to school. Didn't know what I wanted to take. Had no idea. And anyway, I went into the station, and they gave me some script to read. And I went in the studio and read it. And they offered me a job doing news. And so I took it. I didn't have another job going on, so I took it. And that's kind of how it started. And I was offered every other job I've ever gotten. So yeah, it's kind of freaky. It's ridiculous. But I've never applied for a job in broadcasting.
That is beyond wild. And the first job you had, news anchor in Winnipeg, CFRW, right? That sounds about right. Yeah. Yep. And then you eventually came to the East Coast, and you went to Ontario, or that was your first stop before heading to Eastern Ontario, where you are now in the nation's capital. So let's hear about your time in London.
Well, I was only in Winnipeg. My first job in radio only lasted 2.5 months, and I got offered another job that paid a lot more money in London. Now, when I say a lot more money, my first job was doing overnight news in Winnipeg, as you mentioned, and that paid a whopping $750 a month. So when I got offered $1,500 a month to go to London, I jumped at it. So I had only been in the business, only had one job for 2.5 months. So when I went to London, I was a newscaster, and while I was there, the guy who was the sports director of the station, Rick Mueller, went on a sabbatical, took 6 months off, went on a sabbatical, went to find himself. And so the news director came to me, his name was Al Gibson, came to me and said, of all the people we have on staff, you know the most about sports. So would you mind doing the sports while he's gone? I said, sure, yeah, whatever you want me to do. What do I care? I really enjoyed doing news. I thought to myself, okay, now I'm really loving this. I can be a newscaster. And then they asked me to do the sports. So I was doing the sports. And I think after about 4 months of the 6 month sabbatical, the news director called me in, Al Gibson, and said, "We've got a problem." I'm going, "Oh no, what did I do? What did I do?" And he said, "I got a call, because there was no email back then. I got a call from Rick Mueller. He's somewhere in India. He's sold everything he owns. He's now begging, and he's found some kind of a god. Don't know which god he's found, but he's found some god. So that's what he plans to do with the rest of his life. So he's not coming back." I said, "Oh, okay." So he said, "You're doing a good job. Would you like to be the sports director?" I said, "Yeah, okay, sure. That's yeah, okay." So I became the sports director. I think I was, I don't know, 22, something like that, like ridiculous. And so I was there for 2.5 years, and then I got offered a job in Ottawa, where I am now. Got offered a job in Ottawa, and they wanted me to come in and do some work on the football broadcast and be a sportscaster during the week. So I said absolutely, and took the job. And I came here, and the first year I was just a sports reporter and anchored on the weekends. And I did the pre-halftime and post-game show on our football broadcast. So professional football here at that time was the Ottawa Rough Riders of the CFL. After the first year, the color guy left to go to Regina, so I became the color guy. And then the year after that, the play-by-play guy, who was also the morning sports host and the sports director, he left to go to Toronto to do the Argo games. So I think I was maybe 23, maybe 24, and they offered me the job of being the morning sports voice on the radio, being the sports director, and being the new voice of the Ottawa Rough Riders. So I took it. And so, like, literally by the time I was, I don't know, 23, 24, I had what was the biggest job in radio in our city, because the football team was the only professional sport in town at that time. We did not have AAA baseball at that time. The NHL was not here. So I was a kid, basically, and just walked into a great job and got offered it, and just thanked them very much, and kind of worked from there. Then in '92, when our station got the rights for the Ottawa Senators, we bid, our station did, and got the rights. And so basically I could have stayed doing football, or basically throw my head into the ring and see if I can become a hockey guy. I had never called a hockey game of any description at any level. No junior game, no AHL, no anything.
Really? Wow.
I had never called a hockey game, had not done a game anywhere at any level. And so when they gave me the job doing the play-by-play, I was pretty happy. That seemed like a good thing. And that's kind of where it took off. And I think, I don't know how many years in, I started doing radio and TV, the local TV. And I think I started doing about 40 games. The local Packers is about 40 games. So I don't know. I think I was about, I want to say 6 or 7 years into doing the radio broadcast. And I started doing some of the radio and some of the TV. And then in 1996, I think, 1996 or 97, I got a call from John Shannon, who is the executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah. And he asked me if I wanted to work for him on Hockey Night in Canada, and why wasn't I already? And I said, "Well, you've never offered me a job." He said, "Well, I'm offering you one." So I said, "Well, I'll have to talk to my boss at the radio." And they said, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great for our station to have a guy working on Hockey Night in Canada from our station. So yeah, you can go away every Saturday and do that, and we'll cover for you." And so so that actually, he called me on Wednesday, and that Saturday I did my first game on Hockey Night in Canada in Montreal. And the two guys I did the game with were Dick Irvin, who's of course in the Hall of Fame, and John Davidson, who's now the president of the New York Rangers. And those are the two guys I did my very first game with. And then did Hockey Night for years and years, and did Sportsnet here in Ottawa, and continued doing radio. And then 6 years ago, the broadcasting landscape changed here in Ottawa, where Sportsnet, Rogers Sportsnet, no longer owned the regional rights on TV, and TSN bought them. But TSN, TSN TV, they had lots of guys. They didn't need me. So I had a choice. Hockey Night offered me to keep doing Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday and do the Montreal broadcast during the week, or I could go back to doing only radio. And then at the time, I had a couple of kids in school, and because my home games would be in Montreal, I would virtually never be home. I think the first proposed schedule they sent me, I would only be doing 3 games the entire season in my city. So the rest of the games would all be on the road. So I was very, very fortunate, because in our business, you don't oftentimes get the ability to pick and choose, between one job or another. And so I chose to take the radio deal and basically do all the Ottawa games again, just on radio. And been doing that for 6 years. And it was a great decision. I'm loving it. Great for my lifestyle. And again, luckiest guy I know. It's me.
It's really an amazing story, because a lot of people, right when they heard that you were a football player, you hurt your back, you think of, okay, well, if you want to be a football player, well, maybe you would go into coaching. Did you ever think of that in the beginning? Maybe like, well, I broke my back and, broadcasting's not there. That wasn't even a thought. Could coaching be a possibility?
No, because I was never a pro. I played here in Canada. You can play college football or junior football. And when I was growing up, actually junior football in Western Canada put more players into professional football than college football did at that time. It's completely reversed now, but at that time. So I was playing at a high level, but even if I hadn't broken my back, I really don't know whether I would have been a good enough player to be a professional player. I doubt it, to be honest with you. I'm just kind of one of those tweeners. Wasn't big enough to be a power player, wasn't fast enough to, I was between a whole bunch of things. So I'm not sure that I ever would have been a professional player, but I never thought about coaching because, to be honest with you, I was a kid. All that happened, the football happened when I was 19 years old. So I took the job in radio because I didn't have another summer job lined up for the rest of the summer after football ended. So it was not a goal, a life plan. I never went to school for broadcasting. I always get asked, when you were in high school, when you were growing up, what broadcaster did you dream of being? I said, well, nobody. I never dreamed of being a broadcaster. I wasn't sitting home, I was watching, and I wanted to be Denny Potvin on the Islanders. I wanted to be Chuck Leffley in the Montreal Canadiens. I wanted to be, a running back or a tailback in the CFL. But I never thought of myself as being a coach or a broadcaster. I was a stupid 19-year-old. The only thing difference now is I'm a stupid 58-year-old. The stupid has been the common thread that has run through both my life and my career. Stupid has been woven in everything I do, and thus far, stupid has served me very well.
There you go. So you know what? So now we should just name the show Stupid. There you go. That's fantastic.
Works for me.
There you go. So now, obviously, you've been in Ottawa for a long time, and on top of it too, which really is the coolest thing, and so many questions because you brought up how not only you never called a hockey game ever, and so many people say nowadays, and really I'm assuming probably way back when, that hockey is not only the fastest sport, but especially on radio too. You have to be so descriptive to, and it has to be within seconds, not even seconds, at the speed of light. You have to come up with the exact play, with the centering pass, score, but you have to describe it. How difficult was that for you in year number one, and especially because you've been with the team since its inception? It's got to be not only the coolest thing, but you get to really start from the beginning and learn the whole team the whole way, and learn hockey too.
Yeah, once the late Dan Kelly told me before I ever started doing hockey, we were on a telethon together in 1988, and we were sitting on the set, and there was a power outage for an hour. So I'm, again, a stupid kid sitting there with one of the legends of sports broadcasting in this country and in the United States. He's in both halls of fame. And I figured I'm sitting there, and we don't know when the power is going to come back on, but they told us to stay on the set because if it comes back on, we're back on. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, do I start asking them questions? And I thought to myself, you know what? When am I ever going to have a single one-to-one audience with a guy like this? And so I just started asking him questions. And pretty much everything he told me ended up being exactly true. Dan told me that, if you're looking at hockey and football, he had done both professionally at the highest level. And he said that football was actually the harder of the two to call, but hockey was the harder of the two to live, the lifestyle, because there's just so much travel. You're on the road. There's so many games. But what he said was true, and I found it too when I was doing football. Football is more difficult to call because there are more players in motion on every play, and the play explodes and then it stops. Play explodes and then it stops. You have very little room to make a mistake. And in hockey, I know it's the fastest non-motorized sport in the world, but if you've grown up on it like I have as a Canadian, I started playing hockey when I was 4. So you've been in it all of your life at one level or another. Hockey is more rhythmic. Hockey, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, but the game is more rhythmic, and you can get into a rocking chair and call the game, and and not really find yourself in the same kind of nonstop pressure of boom, there's a play. It's a 4-yard handoff, plays over in a second. You know what I mean? There's a long bomb pass in football. Well, that's 2 seconds. It's not long. And you got 2 seconds to get it right. In hockey, it's rhythmic. And, like I said, growing up on it, with hockey, you can feel when something's going to happen. You can feel when there's going to be a big play. So there's not many things that truly surprise you. It does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. But, if you're really into the game, you feel a lot of things coming. But, football once a week, I used to get on a plane on Thursday and you go to the city and you do your work and you come back, you're home the back half of the weekend, and then you start prepping, on Monday for the next game, but it's a game a week. In hockey, it's not like baseball where you're in a city for, a 4-game set. In hockey, by and large, you're in a city, then you're on a plane, you land somewhere else at 2 a.m, you get up, you're at the rink by 9:30 for the morning skate the next day, then you're back to the hotel doing your prep work in the afternoon. Then you put the suit on, have a shower, put the suit on, get on the bus, go to the rink, do the game, get on a plane, go to the next city. So Dan was exactly right, to me anyway, that football is a harder game to call than hockey is, but hockey is definitely a harder life to live as a broadcaster if you're going to do it. Harder on your family, for sure. But I tell people all the time, when you get the same questions all the time, like one of the things that people say was, how do you remember all the players?
Yeah.
It's 1,000 players in the league each year. How do you remember all the players? And I tell them my father was an airline pilot, and that was back in the days when you could bring people up to the cockpit just to look around, pre-9/11. So he used to have people come up to the cockpit all the time, just passengers, come out, say hi. And people would get up to the cockpit and they would go, Captain Brown, how do you know what all these knobs and buttons are? Because it's very intimidating when you walk up to this 1,000, 2,000, who knows how many buttons and knobs there are. And my dad used to say, he'd say the same thing all the time. He said, first of all, I better know what they all do. But his second answer always was, what do you do for a living? And whatever the guy would say, I work in the widget business. My dad would say, well, you know what? In your business, you automatically know more than 1,000 things. You just can't count them. You can't stack them up. In my business, they're right here. You can't avoid them. And It's the same with me. In my business, there's only 1,000 players, which sounds daunting when you say 1,000 players. But by and large, the league only changes about 20% each year between some players leaving the league, some players coming into the league, some players retiring, other players coming in from the KHL. So about 20% of the players change. And when it's all you do, which is all I do, I'm keeping track of it all summer long. So it's really knowing the players is actually not close to the hardest part of the job. The hardest part of the job in all the new rinks is seeing the players, because the broadcast booths are not ticket revenue generating. So they're owners are very reticent to give up spots where you could sell tickets just to put a dumb media guy. So some of the newer buildings in the league are a long ways away from the ice. And so the problem is seeing who it is, not knowing who it is. If I can see his number or his face, I can tell you who it is. For most of the players in the East, after a while, you get to realize that skating style is like a fingerprint. So oftentimes you know who it is just by how they skate. But that's the more challenging part. Not knowing who they are is not the problem. Seeing them and knowing it's him, that's the harder part.
Right. Yeah. And it's very funny that you bring up with certain places or certain arenas, because, not too far from here on Long Island, obviously Nassau Coliseum is hockey centric. But then where the Islanders have been the last 5 years in a basketball in a basketball arena, and basically where they have you guys set up is right where the right where the camera booths would be for a regular basketball game. Am I right? So have you ever been to the Barclays and call a game there, Ottawa and the Islanders?
Yeah, many. I've called many there. I don't know where they put the cameras for basketball, but I can tell you, I understand the problems in Uniondale. I get it, but selfishly for me, for broadcasting, it's fantastic. You're close to the ice. You got lots of room to work. It's fantastic. The Barclays Center, and not their fault. It was built for concerts and basketball, and easily the worst building in the league to work in for a radio broadcaster. TV on the other side of the building, they built them something which I understand is pretty good. But from where we are, we're on the goal line, low, not enough space. You're working on half a card table, 2 guys and a producer on half a card table. It's really minor league. It's really, well, it's not even minor league. In the minor leagues, there's lots of places way better than broadcasting from Barclays Center, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's
so the visiting radio broadcasters, I have to be honest with you, are so glad they're building a new building. The other thing is, to be honest with you, more visiting radio broadcasters get sick there than anywhere else, because where we are, you're right underneath an air conditioning vent. So by and large, and I'm not joking, by and large, it doesn't matter when the game is. We always keep our winter jackets on during the entire broadcast, because you've got an air conditioning vent just blowing ice cold air on you the whole game. So it's really, it was never meant to be there. I know that was probably a stopgap, and that building was never designed for it, and I get all that. But the reality is, for the visiting radio, for radio in general, I know where Chris does the games from, and I know I wouldn't want to put him in a tough spot to criticize, where he works, but it's easily the worst place in the league for that.
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, going there as a fan, and also going there as credentialed media. I've been all the way up, on the steep stairwell, and I never knew. I was always wondering. I remember when we had Chris King on, we had asked him. He was right on the blue line on the opposite side, and basically right on the concourse. It's really, really terrible. But that again brings to my next point is that because now you've been in the business for so long, in the beginning, Dean, when you would have, let's say, a rotation of or your first ever color guy, and then that first ever color guy left. How difficult of a transition was it for you to get acclimated to working with someone brand new?
Well, to be honest with you, in radio, it's never been an issue, because Gord Wilson and I started together.
Right.
And even during portions of my career where I would flit off to do TV here and there, Gord has always been the color guy on radio. So I've never worked with another color guy on radio. We've always been a team on radio. That would be a better question for him, with all the other play-by-play guys he's had to work with when I've been off doing TV stuff. Right. But in TV, I had many of them, because when I was doing the stuff on Rogers Sportsnet, we would have a consistent color guy for our Ottawa broadcast. But on Hockey Night in Canada, the assignments change all the time. It's still the same now. It's same as being on NBC.
Yeah.
You could be working with a different guy. So for me, it really wasn't that difficult. Wasn't that hard at all, because my perspective on the job, my job is. I've had arguments is the wrong term. I've had this philosophical discussion with producers that I've worked with, who disagree. But I believe that my job is the facilitator. If you're the play-by-play guy, you're the facilitator, because I'm the one who's on the air the most. It's just the nature of the job. It's just, whether you're on TV or radio, you're on the air the most. So to bring people in, to bring people out, to let people jump in on a play, you're the guy who's the traffic cop. I have to call the traffic, and you have to get it right. But it's my job to put the color guy in a cradle and rock him, because really the color guys, that's the skill part of broadcasting. The color guys in the booth, the expert is the guy sitting beside you, not you. And if you're the play-by-play guy, the sooner you figure that out, the better off you are. I have not worked with any color guy in my life ever who knows less than me. They all know more than me, all of them. And the skill that they have which is really an awesome skill. The skill that they have, the good ones, they see a play in real time. They know exactly what happened and why. They can break it down and tell you, the listener or the viewer, immediately in a way that is not so technical that you can't understand as the average fan. You know what they're saying. That is true skill. So for me, I've always looked at it like, I'm the guy who's doing the traffic. I'm telling you who's going where, but the guy who has to actually break it down, think about it, and then deliver it in a way that the average fan can understand, and not being too technical, and not being too, making the fan feeling like he's a dummy. That's a great skill. That's a great skill. And I've been very fortunate to work with most of the very best guys, to be honest with you. You start mentioning the best color guys, and somewhere along the way, I've pretty much worked with all of them. Especially in Canada, I've worked and guys in the States as well. I've worked with Eddie Olczyk. I've worked with Razor down in Dallas. I've worked with Pierre Maguire. You start running down. I never worked with Boucher because he wasn't a broadcaster. He was still a player when, so I haven't worked with him. But, you go through Canada. I've worked with pretty much all the best guys. And I like to think that we usually have very good shows, mostly because the show isn't about me. If you have a hockey broadcast and it's all about the play-by-play guy, I guarantee you have a crappy broadcast. Because all the smartest people are in the truck. The producers and the directors, and I know they think I say this because I'm sucking up to them. Well, I'm no longer in TV, so it doesn't matter. But the producers and the directors, the two guys you never see, those two guys specifically, lots of talented people's in truck, but those two guys, they're the ones who create TV. Those are the ones who make the pictures. They tell the story. The color guy and I, we're just the puppets who have to say what we see and what they tell us where we're going with the story. But they are the ones who create the story in real time. Like, it's an unbelievably difficult job. And the guys who work in the NHL, some of them are unbelievably talented. And then on the talent scale, the next guy is the color guy, and then me. And even though mine takes up the most time, it doesn't require the most skill. So I always look at my job as clearly you got to call the plays and you want to make sure they're correct and exciting, and you want to portray the game properly. But really, I look at my job as following the map that the producer sets out, taking direction from the director at times into how we're going to show that or listen to that, and then try to create an environment that the color person can do what they do the best. Set them up. Don't trap them. Don't steal their stuff. Don't try and limit their time. Whatever that color person has to say is going to be more enlightened than anything I could tell you. So let's have more of them and less of the play-by-play guys. So that's kind of my philosophy. So getting used to or dealing with or working with color guys for me has always been easy, because I just look at it that it's my job to make sure it's easy for them. And that makes for a good broadcast.
Right, and you never interrupt the analyst whenever they're speaking, and you basically take the back seat while they're trying to break down the game for the fan. And not only that, also with some of these players too, they could even bring up a couple of terms that were said in the locker room or something like that the average hockey fan, as you said before, could be like, "What did he say?" Right?
Yeah.
So that would be that really wouldn't be good. Now, going back to Hockey Night in Canada, the coolest thing obviously is for you. You being really no joke, the luckiest guy that we've had on here, the luckiest broadcaster that we've had on here, because you've been able to literally do it all in Canada. So being on the biggest stage in Canada, in the country, to be able to do that. Now, the question that I would have here is that now you're calling two different teams, not named Ottawa, let's say. Is that difficult for you, especially when you're calling Ottawa games, let's say, 2 nights before, and then you have to say, okay, now I'm not calling Ottawa, I'm calling Montreal and, I don't know, let's say Toronto as the two teams, and you have to make sure, okay, I'm not calling Bobby Ryan, Colin White, I'm not calling those guys, I'm calling Jonathan Drouin or John Tavares or whoever it may be.
Really not an issue. Obviously you have more familiarity with the team that you call most often, but that doesn't necessarily mean bias. I think one of the big differences that a lot of people don't realize is most of the radio broadcasters on the American side are employees of the team that they broadcast. I think all of the broadcasters in Canada are not. I'm not an employee of the team. No. And so they don't tell me what to say. I say what I want to say. And we're all in that situation. So I'm not beholden. I'm employed by Bell Media. Bell Media owns TSN Radio all across the country. So that's who my employer is. And it's just it is a different kind of headspace, because I'm trying to think of any of the guys that I know in the States that aren't employed by the team, and I can't think of one. That's the norm in the United States, because I think a lot of the early broadcasting and radio in hockey kind of came off the baseball model, and almost every baseball radio play-by-play guy is an employee of the team.
Right.
So to be honest with you, I've always, we've been very lucky that no one has ever put their thumb on us to say, hey, you guys can't say stuff like that. We'd like you to be more this, more that. That's really never been the situation. Just whatever happens, just say it. People aren't dumb. People don't want you to tell them fairy tales. If it happened, it happened. The funny thing is, if people have a perception about you, and I tell young broadcasting students this all the time, you cannot worry, especially with social media. You cannot worry what people think about you or say about you.
Oh yeah.
Because the reality is once they get a perception of what they think you are, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how you try to convince them that you're not. It doesn't have any impact. If they think you're a bootlicking homer, it doesn't matter what you say. That's what it is. If they think you're too hard on the home team, what are you doing? Why are you being so hard on? You can't convince them. I remember, and I tell this story all the time, I remember a game that I was doing, and a player that was beloved in Ottawa, his name is Chris Phillips. He was the first overall pick of this team. Great player. Team's retired his jersey. IMC the jersey retirement. You know what I mean? But there was a game, and he was awful. And the game-winning goal scored against Ottawa was scored directly off a turnover that he created on a terrible play. And so that's what we said on the air. It's, like the guy, he's a fantastic guy, but that's what happened. The funny thing was, you want to talk about perspective. After the game, I was getting emails because with us in emails, to be honest with you, everybody in the company has the same email. So if you know one guy's email, you know how the other ones are structured. Like there's a certain company structure. Yeah. So if you know one guy's email, you know whatever. So I'm getting emails. And the thing that made me laugh was from the same game, the same broadcast, almost exactly half of the people were sending me, mean-spirited emails. Half of them were, Brown, you horrible boot-licking homer. It is sickening how much you just suck up to the team and suck up to the players, you wheezy apologist. And the other half of them were, why are you so mean on the home team? Chris Phillips is a great guy. Why are you trying to embarrass him? What are you doing? Don't you want the home team to win? Don't you like living here? What's wrong with you? All from the same play in the same game on the same night. So the people who believe you're a boot-licking homer, they're going to believe that no matter what you say. And the people who can't believe you still have your job because you seemingly hate the team and don't say anything positive, that's what they think. And the problem is too many young broadcasters listen to that. The only guy that matters is the one that pays you. The man or woman who is your boss that signs your paycheck, their opinion is the one you should work on most. And generally, they want to work on those people. They want to look out for what the best quality broadcast is that seems fair and seems reasonable. That's what they want. So I've never, put it this way, I've been doing hockey since 1992, and I've been broadcasting about 37 years or whatever it's been. I have never, ever had any of my bosses ever come and tell me what to say on the air, ever. No one has ever told me what to say. So when you ask me about, doing a game when I was working for Hockey Night, doing an Ottawa Washington game one night and the next night doing Calgary Edmonton, it's just two more teams, bunch of guys, shoots, he scores. It's just one of the things that Dan Kelly taught me too, and you do get it from people, is when you get wound up and you make a hard call on a goal in a 6-2 game, and guys go, what are you getting all wound up and calling a goal like a 6-2 in a 6-2 game? The game's over. What are you getting excited for? Dan Kelly told me something a long time ago. Respect the game, respect the players, period. If you respect the game and you respect the players, people might not like the way you do it, but they're always going to respect how you do it. And the reason I do that is the job is play by play. It's not period by period. It's not game by game. So if the game sucks, that doesn't mean that a great player still can't make a great play. Period. So I'm calling the play. If he makes a great play in a 6-2 game, I'm calling it as a great play. And I'm also calling it as a great play if it's not the Ottawa player who's making it. Because the guy on the other team who makes that play, if that's a great play from a great player, it's still a great play, even though it's not an Ottawa player. Now, guys who work for the team, sometimes that's a different story. They get somebody coming in from the team saying, listen, heard the game last night. You got pretty excited on their power play goal. Hey, what are you doing? Right. I'm very fortunate. I never have those. No one ever has those conversations with me. So for me, I never worry about those kinds of things. If it's a great play, it's a great play, and I don't care what the score of the game is, and I don't care who makes the play. If it's a great play, it's a great play.
Yeah, it's very funny again that you bring that up, because when we had, and I hate to keep going back and forth, but it's really amazing because of how different it is, not only here in the States, but also, as you said, in Canada. when we had Randy Hahn and Brett Hedican on, I had asked them both because they've both appeared on NBCSN here, and they've also called Sharks games as well on the national stage. So, when you ask them that question, and then now I can ask you that, have you ever called a game with, and obviously I'm actually going to answer my own question, but, to be able to call, let's say, Ottawa on Hockey Night in Canada, it never really mattered. Is that the case? Like, it never really mattered how you said it because it was, you never worked for Eugene Melnyk. You just worked for CBC or whoever it was.
Yep. No, it really didn't change how I did the games. And you know what? For my job, doing the play-by-play, when you're doing it, put it this way, I've never heard anybody who does play-by-play where they're emotional calling the game be really good for a really long period of time. It's kind of the job to, like I said, my father was an airline pilot, and one of the things they say about airline pilots is one of the reasons why they can deal with extreme situations when they have to is the way their brains work. It compartmentalizes everything and prioritizes everything, and that's how their brains work. The brains are almost separate from emotion, and that's what you have to do that job. If this happens, I do this. If this happens, I do that. To prevent that happening, I have to do this now. And so that's the way they work. It's kind of the same way. I think I get that from my father because it's kind of the same way for me doing play-by-play. I'm not sitting there jumping up in my seat when things are happening because I'm calling the play. It happens. You give it what it deserves. Then you move on to what's next. This is coming. I got to get my color guy in to break that down. When Gord's done doing his thing, then I have to get ready for the face-off. So you're constantly putting everything in boxes in my head, and you're just doing what's inside the box until you get to the next one. So it really never was an issue. The funny thing is, and I don't expect people who don't do this for a living to understand, but it's kind of two different philosophies in that I tell people, I said, don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing myself to a surgeon. Don't have the education. Hand is not that steady. I've broken every finger. I wouldn't be able to hold a scalpel properly. But the reality is there is a reason why they don't allow surgeons to operate on their own family members, because then there's emotion that comes into the technical aspect of the job. A surgeon has to be able to get in the operating room, know what they have to do, how they have to do it, how they have to have everyone around them who's supporting them do what they do, and then they go about it piece by piece by piece. If you enter emotion into it, that can get in the way of doing the job properly. And I tell people, I said, that's kind of how my mind works when I'm doing play-by-play. But when they ask me, well, so you don't care if Ottawa wins? I said, no, I'll be totally honest with you. I want Ottawa to win, but selfishly. I live in Ottawa. People around me are happier if Ottawa wins. My kids grew up on this team. They're fans of the team. They want the team to win. So yeah, that's all good. And selfishly, yes, I want Ottawa to win because us contract guys, we get paid by the game. Right. If Ottawa wins and makes it to the playoffs, I make more money. So yeah, I want them in the playoffs, and yeah, I want them to win because that's how you get to the playoffs. And it makes everybody in my life around me happier. Ottawa's a happier place when the home team is winning. So, of course, I want them to win. But I don't call the games differently because I would prefer that outcome. Calling the games is calling the games. Living in the real life around that is your kids, your life, your pay, how much you make. It's all those things come into it. But they don't really cross into each other. And for a lot of people, they go, oh, yeah, so you get paid more, so you're not cheering for them. No, to be honest with you, when you're doing the job, you don't really have time to cheer. There's coaches and players that I'm around all the time that I admire, some more than others. But, I couldn't do a broadcast if I was cheering my way through it. It's just not the way I'm wired.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also how, as you said earlier, if you do certain things stupidly, it will, and if it's all focused on the play-by-play guy, it's going to be, as you said, a crappy broadcast. So can't really do that. So let's actually rewind for a quick second. So 1989, about, 31 years ago, in that range, you were, Dean Brown, the youngest broadcaster ever to call a Grey Cup championship game inside the now Rogers Center, but at the time known as the Sky Dome. So talk about that experience and with the record still being held by you.
Yeah, I guess so. I never really thought about it, but yeah, that's true. So Yeah, I was chosen that year to do the national broadcast of the Grey Cup game. It was at the Sky, the first Grey Cup they ever played at the Sky Dome, and that was obviously being a national broadcast. Went coast to coast, but also through Armed Forces Radio, went around the world because they broadcast that in every NATO and Canadian base all around the world. Yeah. So, to be honest with you, that was one of the most daunting things I've ever done. Not because the game was hard to call, or because it was any harder game than any other game, and not even because you're thinking of how many people are listening. Because to be honest with you, I'm very fortunate that I've never been afflicted by that. It just doesn't have an impact on me. But in a broadcast like that, the national radio broadcast, even though it is the national and international radio broadcast, they don't give you as much room as you need for that kind of a broadcast. So in the broadcast booth, we have a broadcast booth for that. And I didn't realize this was coming because I never bothered to get. They asked me to. I got a call and said, "You've been selected. Do you want to do it?" And I said, absolutely, I want to do it. But there's me in the broadcast booth. Right beside me is a color guy from one team and a color guy from the other team, and I'm the neutral play-by-play guy. Then behind me is the guy who's running the board, the guy who's the director, the operator. Beside him is the producer of the show. Beside him is two runners. Beside him is the guy who's going to host the halftime show. Beside him is the two guests he's going to have on the halftime show. So all of a sudden, I'm trying to do the game, and there's literally like 12 people in the booth. And at one point, the great thing for me was that a guy who had been one of my mentors, he was older than me, he was the play-by-play voice of the BC Lions at the time, JP McConnell. And he was the guy that they had chosen to be the host of the halftime and the postgame show. And he was the one in the booth there. And so all these people are rushing around, and they're handing me cards and stuff like this to read. And you got to do that. And everybody's trying to, and JP was the one, because he's a play-by-play guy, so he knows. He's the one who basically took charge of the back of the room and basically said, you got to give this kid a chance. Like, you got to give him a chance. The first game he's done, national game he's done, you got to give him a chance here. And so he was saying, listen, you don't need to be in here. Go stand outside in the door. If we need you, we'll yell outside. And back of the line here, anywhere back here, you can have a conversation. In front of the line, you can't, because he's going to hear it. So JP was the guy who really took control of the booth. I didn't. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the clout. I would never have had the gall to do it. Because everybody in that booth had way more experience than me, but I was the kid they picked, and so I went in to do it. But really, it was a really successful broadcast, and actually one of the ones I'm most proud of, mostly because of how my friend, my mentor, JP McConnell, took control of the room to be able to allow me to do it. And it also down the road led to, I don't know if I've said this to anybody before. It led me to one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned in this business about how to screw myself financially.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned I still made money, but didn't make anywhere close to the amount of money that I should have made. So after the Grey Cup game is over, Saskatchewan had beaten Hamilton. The Saskatchewan Roughriders in the province of Saskatchewan, the only professional sports team. It's not just in the city of Regina where they are, where it's big. It's a huge thing all through the entire province. It's like, the huge thing all over an entire state, the biggest thing. So after the game is over, it's weeks later. They want to, back in the days where they had VHS tapes, they wanted to basically produce a video of the championship season to give to season ticket holders, but sell to anybody else in Saskatchewan who wanted a keepsake. So the CBC owned the broadcast rights to the game, and they wouldn't allow Saskatchewan to use them. So they wanted to use the radio rights, and I'm not sure who owned the radio rights, but they said no. So they don't have anyone they can't use any of the clips. So they can use the video, but they can't have any voice on it. So their idea was, well, we can't get the national radio feed and use that, but what we can do is we can hire the guy who did it to fly into Saskatchewan and get him to recall the game in a studio. So basically, I didn't recall the whole game. They had someone go through the game and basically write down everything that I said during the broadcast, every word I said during the broadcast. And then the producer picked out certain calls that he wanted me to recreate. And so I went in the studio for a full day and recreated something. They would play me my own call so I could remember what I said and how I did it. And then I would recall it. So they could basically just pay me to recall a game that I'd already done, but it didn't violate any copyright laws. And then they would sell the videos. So the deal they made for me is they fly me into Regina, spend the day in the studio, first class air travel. And they said, well, you have the choice. We'll give you $2,500 or you can take 25 cents per video. And I thought to myself, well, how many of these are they really going to sell? Like, seriously.
Right.
So I took the $2,500. At the third, I never asked after that because it became too depressing. So I don't actually know what the final number would have been. But when I stopped asking my buddy in Saskatchewan how many they'd actually sold, by the time they got to the third pressing, and I believe there was 2 more after that, I would have made $25,000 had I taken the 25 cents a video. So I learned a very quick lesson about screwing myself financially right after that Grey Cup. So it was a fantastic experience calling the game, and it taught me how to screw myself financially.
Wow.
I know, eh?
Wow. That is, I
take the 25 cents a video. If anybody asks you, take the 25 cents a video.
That's wild. Now, not only that, but I've never heard of the whole issue where you have the radio, the video, and then you have the copyright. I mean, obviously we've heard of the whole, music soundtracks. We've heard of, you can't use said voice because it's on here or whatever the case may be. And it went all the way back to then. That's wild. So yeah, I guess you're right. Don't take the 25 cents a video because you never know.
Stupid just runs through my career. Stupid just weaves through my career.
Stupid and lucky, right? That's the biggest thing. Oh my goodness. So let's fast forward to the 2019-20 season. Now, the last couple of years since the 2017 Eastern Conference Final, we all know what happened there. Pittsburgh went to the Stanley Cup Final against Ottawa. It stunk. I know. I was really rooting for Ottawa. Not going to lie. But now it's been a little bit of a rebuild or a major rebuild. So you're calling the game out in the California Gauntlet or in Los Angeles, I'm assuming, during the time of March 12th. So March 12th, the date that will live on forever in the sports world, the day the sports world stopped turning and still has not fully returned to turning fully. The Sens lost 3-2. Your season was done anyway, but now the season comes to a screeching halt. Dean, this is uncharted territory, not only for you, but for literally everyone on the face of this earth. There's no one that lived through the Spanish flu, and there were no sports then that were televised. So give us a little bit of a background for you, what you thought of the moment you heard that games could be canceled and all interviews are now 6 feet away.
Yeah. Well, when it happened, when we were in California, the NHL, there's already been a couple of NBA players who had tested positive. So there were immediate protocols that went into play. And the very next game in Anaheim, for us, they had players standing 6 feet away. And, I don't really do the interviews. So, I didn't have to be the one holding my microphone on a stick, but we had to be 6 feet away. But I feel very confident in saying that none of us really understood what it really was. We did not truly understand the width and breadth of this and what the steps were going to be and how fast they were going to come, to be honest with you. I remember we were on a plane, played in LA in the same locker room as the basketball player tested positive. And we're on the plane the next morning and we're sitting there on the tarmac. Because as we're sitting on the tarmac, we're not rolling anywhere because that's when the governors had their emergency meeting. So we were sitting in the airplane on the tarmac in LA while the governors were having their meeting about what they're going to do because we can't take off. We're either going to San Jose or we're going home, and we didn't know which it was going to be. And so we sat there for an hour and then finally got the word that the season was being put on pause to be honest with you, most of us thought, well, they're going to get this straightened out in a week or something, or whatever this is, and they're going to find a way. And so, but for us, it took another, it was over an hour of sitting on the tarmac because we had to put more fuel on the plane. Well, I didn't, but they had to put more fuel on the plane because now instead of going to San Jose, we're going back across the country, and they had to file all new flight plans and go through the border and everything. And you got to file that stuff in advance. So basically, we just sat there for, I think it ended up being like an hour and a half on the tarmac, and we were the first team in the league that had to get turned around. Others, obviously, everybody else had to go home. It was on the road, but we were the ones who were literally at the airport to go to the next game and had to turn around and go a different way. So none of us really thought about. I don't think any of us really thought it was a big thing at that time, like most everybody else in the rest of the world. I remember sitting in my seat on the plane, and the things that the Spanish flu didn't come to mind. 50 million people dying from the Spanish flu didn't come to mind that this could be the same kind of cataclysmic event. I never thought in my seat, man, by the end of August, there could be 180,000 Americans dead. My God, that's unbelievable. Those thoughts never went through my head at the time. So to be honest with you, it wasn't really surreal because at least I did not really grasp what was actually going on and how big this was and how big it would become. So I think it's one of those things where, you look back on it and you go, yeah, like, absolutely, we should have flown home. It was, and, after Ottawa got home, I don't know how many weeks it was, but there was a couple of players tested positive. And I think in total, there has been, I want to say, I think 5 players have tested positive, all of which have recovered. And I think 1 member of the staff and 1 broadcaster, my broadcast partner, Gord Wilson, tested positive and got COVID-19. And the thing that's amazing is in the broadcast booth on the plane, we sit right beside each other. I mean, elbow to elbow. So it is amazing to me that I never got it, even though Gord did. And he was very ill for a couple of weeks, So it's just, that's the kind of the bizarre nature of it, where you're not even thinking about it, and all of a sudden he's got it. And the guy that I sit right beside, gets it, and I don't. How's that even possible? But that's just the bizarre nature of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's the unknown, as we've heard and we've said all across the last 33 episodes on this interview series, because we've asked every single guest about what does it feel like, and it's almost like at times we take certain things for granted, as you were saying, well, it could be done in a week, and then I remember, again, for myself too, at Madison Square Garden with Big East tournament, we're sitting there, we're like, all right, how is this going to play out? We don't know how this is going to play out. It could be a week, it could be a month. We didn't think that would be the case, but now you guys are sitting on the tarmac. I got to ask you this little play-by-play here. So you guys are sitting on the tarmac, and because you guys have to go obviously back to Ottawa into a different country now, you guys stayed put, or you guys turned back around and went back to LAX and just stayed in LA for a while?
No, we were on the tarmac at LAX.
Okay, well, I'm saying, like, did you had to go back to the gate and just like go back to your hotel, or did you guys?
No, we stayed in the plane. You got to remember that I believe all the teams in the league fly out of FBOs. We don't fly out of the normal terminal. We fly out of the private terminal. Yeah. You're just waiting. And to be honest with you, we knew there was no thought of getting off the plane and going back to the hotel, because we knew we would be going somewhere. We were either going to be leaving to go to San Jose, or we're going to be leaving to go to Ottawa. If you have a mechanical problem or whatever where they know you're not going to be leaving, then yes, they call the buses back. You get back on the bus, you go to the hotel. But we knew we were going to be leaving. We just didn't know where. Right. And we also knew with the NHL governors, we knew they weren't going to have a 5-hour meeting. So it's not like you're sitting there going, well, we could be here all day sitting on the plane. Yeah. You pretty much knew this is going to be a 45-minute to an hour meeting, and then we know where we're going. And so we just sat on the tarmac at the LAX outside the FBO, the private air center, and waited for word.
Yeah. Now, when you hear that, and and as you were saying earlier, it could be a week, could be a month, and then it doesn't come to fruition. And then the season is officially on pause, and then we hear a restart to play. And Ottawa is not included in that 24 team bubble. What did that feel like for you when, you're only, I think it was 61 or 62 games into the season? And yes, even though obviously, again, Ottawa's going through a major rebuild, but you're on the road for a whole, or calling games for 82 total games. So now you're calling about 15 to 20 less games this year. Did it feel weird that you were done in March as opposed to April or May?
Yeah, it definitely felt weird. But again, you know what? There's different things. There's obviously the weird feeling of you not finishing a season, 11 games left, and there's the other practical side. Like I've told you, we're freelance guys. We work for the radio station on a per game basis. So I would be lying if I didn't say, well, they're going to try and replay those 11 games, right? Because if they don't play them, I don't get paid for them. And I don't know if you've heard this axiom. It's not really true in hockey, but it is in hockey broadcasting. There's no I in team, but there's two in invoice. So, you really have to worry and think about the invoice side of it if you're a broadcaster who's doing this for a living. And then you're holding out hope that as they continue to talk about trying to get the whole regular season, you think, well, at least I'm going to get those 11 paychecks back. And then you go through another little dip when you see that they're not going to do that. And Ottawa's not going to be one of the teams that goes in the playoffs because, of course, being in the playoffs or the play-ins or whatever they want to call it would be great because, again, you're going to get to do some hockey and you're going to get paid. But that's just the life of doing this. It doesn't always work out, and none of us can complain about this job. You have to budget a little bit tighter, but I'm not going to pretend that, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I do just fine. So you just have to budget a little bit differently. But those are the things you think of. I know that, fans look at it differently. It's depressing the team's not going to play. But, the connection is a different thing between what a fan feels and what a broadcaster or someone that does this for a living feels. You want to do games because you love doing games. Seriously, that's the first thing. The only thing better than doing my job is playing. And I would argue with anybody about that. So not doing it is a big thing. Yeah. Not getting paid is also a thing too. We all do this for a living. So those are things that come into play. And just the feeling, that, it's unfinished. You didn't finish it. None of us go into a season thinking that you want to, get 70 games into or 71 games into the season. That'd be good enough. Everybody wants to do 82 or more, so it all has a weird feeling and a weird cadence to it. And in this game, in most professional sports, there is a cadence to your life when you do this for a long time. Your body starts to tell you when it's, time to start going back to the rink. There's a rotation in this life. And if you don't make the playoffs, if you're the team you cover, whatever you do doesn't make the playoffs, you could be not working for 5 months.
Right.
Well, I'm now in month 7 of not doing anything. And, I have lots of jobs to do around the house here. But one thing that I have discovered of myself is I am exactly as lazy as I thought I was.
That was one of the last questions I was going to ask was, were there any other things that you're catching up on?
I got tons of stuff to do. It's just a matter of
when we're going to get it done.
I'd like to tell you that over this time, the reason I haven't gotten it done because I displaced my hip or something. I have no excuses. During the hockey season, it's it's 7 days a week. So I got to tell you that lure of Netflix. They have so many movies, so many shows. The lure of that. All the stuff I have to repair around the house and things I could fix and things I could do and build. And the really horrible part is that I'm actually quite handy and I know how to do all these things. It's not that I can't find someone to do it. I know how to do it. I'm just too lazy to do it. And so, when Netflix, I'm sitting there going, Sue and I look at going, I never got a chance when it was on live. I never got a chance to watch Sons of Anarchy. Let's watch every episode over 3 days. Let's sleep 2 hours a day and watch all of Sons of Anarchy just in a row. So we've been doing stuff like that, and I still have a substantial list of things to do, which is really embarrassing because the other thing I know is that when hockey does start up again, they say maybe December, that means that next season, these are all the same things I won't do next season.
Yeah. Right, it's true, and not only that too. While and just to interrupt for one quick second, Dean, if you have like a few more minutes, I know we're crossing over the hour threshold. I just want to make sure. All right, good.
I got nothing but time. No jobs I'm going to get to.
Gotcha. Okay, good. So for those that are watching right now on Zingo Television here in the United States, channel, I believe it's 190 on Zingo TV, I-95 Sports Network, we will be moving over to Beyond the Buzzer with our partner, Danny. Yeah, exactly. Our partner, Danny Thompson. So stay with us.
Danny Thompson does that show?
Yeah, Danny Thompson, the NBA guy down in Florida.
That Danny Thompson?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, well, oh, that's great. Beyond the Buzzer begins right now on the I-95 Sports Network. We cannot thank Dean Brown enough, and also everyone here at the Blackjack Media Network. Beyond the Buzzer begins right now. And we are back here on the Eastern Observer, the YouTube account, everywhere, Facebook. We cannot thank you all enough for sticking aboard. Dean, thank you so much for sticking aboard as we just turned off that feed on our side. So just to get back to what we were talking about earlier was Sons of Anarchy, and also being able to do this now. Now the next question, actually, which is a perfect segue, is that now that you've been home on month number 7 now you obviously have a family here, and to think of, could we be a little spoiled now that, well, we're here, I'm here for a long time. And, could the wife be like, all right, well, you're not home next, what month are we in? We're in August right now. See, the quarantine has really gotten with all of our heads. Now that October, there will not be an opening day. We will most likely, or an opening night. We'll see it most likely December or January. So we don't know. What are your thoughts there about, obviously the pushed back opening day and almost a full year without playing hockey and being at the rink?
Well, like I said before, it takes you out of the normal rhythm of your life, number one. Number two, the thing that really scares me is that with the pandemic, there's been no opportunity for a lot of independent production. So Netflix might have run out of things I haven't seen because they're not producing any new ones. So, and the stuff that I want to watch the next season of, there might not be a next season until next season. So those are things I'm really concerned about. My kids now are citizens, so I barely see them. One of them's in university in another city. The other one downstairs, I think he's down there right now. He's down there playing the piano, playing video games, doing homework. Hardly see them. They're citizens now. They pay taxes. They don't need or want me. So it's basically Sue and I what we want to do. Yeah. And I think it's just going to be one of those things where you just have to be patient. You can't let it drive you crazy, because on a serious note, you are right that we get in the habit of doing things, and this is very much a habitual business. When people ask me, well, almost every job is like that, I say, well, no, not quite. Like our business is very much, if you cover one team like I do, and you're not independently flying commercial, I'm allowed to fly. Gordon and I are allowed to fly in the team charters. So even though we're not on the team, we're allowed on the team charter because our company made an agreement with the hockey team to provide anyway. So we are allowed, the rest of the media is not allowed on the team charters, but we are. Right. So our lives really are very much like being in a cocoon. I got to be frank with you, because there's so many things that because we travel with the team and the players, get the benefit of the kind of lives that the team and the players benefit from. And that is not having to think. You don't need to think at all. You don't need to be conscious. Other than the games, you don't even need to really be conscious to be a professional hockey player, because one of your teammates or whatever, if you're not conscious, can drive you to the place where the airport. But then, they give you an envelope with your per diem in it. They take your car keys and they'll take care of your car while you're gone. Then you get on the airplane and you sit in the same seat. It has your name on it. They already know what you eat and drink and whether you like to eat and drink before you take off or after you like. So they know everything. The crews are unbelievable. When you land, you get off the plane. The bus is right there. You get on, you sit in the seat you like and the one you always go to. Then you go to the hotel. When you get to the hotel, there's a great big table. There'll be an envelope with your name on it. Inside that envelope is the key to your room. You go to your room. There's no checking in. You go to your room, and then there's a piece of paper that tells you what room and where the team meal is, what time the bus is tomorrow morning. So that is the normal cadence of their lives and our lives. So you don't even need to think to cover the NHL in my situation. Yeah. As long as I can get someone to take me to that initial first step, which is at the airport, I also can do it completely unconscious. I can, other than making a mess of your suit while you're trying to eat if you're unconscious, but everything else you can do and not be conscious. So it is more of a cocoon type environment than a normal job. And that's just the way it is. So when you're used to that and everything being taken care of for you, and that's the rotation of your life on a daily basis, your body is, this time of year, your body's saying, in 2 more weeks, as when training camp starts. Right. In 4 weeks, that's when the season starts. And that your body, your mind is telling you it's that time. And when that's not happening, you're kind of going, okay, where's what hotels? Well, there's no hotel, So we are very much creatures of habit, and this is by no means a habit right now.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I said, it's completely wild to see hockey potentially not starting all the way until November, December, January, whenever it is, and also the Stanley Cup being lifted potentially sometime in October. The weirdest thing, free agency, draft time, mid to late October, whatever the case is, really, really weird stuff. Now, you were talking earlier about, again, rewinding just a little bit, when you had to call, basically you had to redo your calls on a monitor. Now, yes. See a lot of these broadcasters now, not only in baseball, calling it off of a monitor if they're on the road, but we're also seeing in the first round of the playoffs, for the Stanley Cup playoffs, they're calling it off of a monitor because none of the local media could be there except if you're Jim Houston or John Forsland, Kenny Albert here, or Chris Cuthbert and Louis DeBrusque out in Edmonton. So now for you, if you had to be put in that situation, Dean, what would be your mindset? Where you obviously have, thankfully you have a lot more camera angles with, in the bubble, but just the thought of calling it off of a monitor and not having ice below you.
It's harder. And I have called monitor games when I was working for Hockey Night. Actually, it was a great double dip day for me. We were in Toronto, and I can't remember what it was, but Hockey Night in Canada, we had to do a couple of games that were in Europe back when they were sending teams over. And so I was in Toronto already because there was a Maple Leaf Senators game at night. In the afternoon, Greg Millen and I went into a studio in Toronto, and we called a Calgary-Denver game, I think it was, off monitor from Sweden. So now the monitors you have are big, and you get other camera angles that you won't see on TV because they know that as a play-by-play guy especially, but a color guy more importantly, the game camera basically follows the puck and who's got the puck. That doesn't help you in who's coming over the boards, who's changing, who's going after who. Is there a fight starting over here that I can't see? So we had 2 monitors. One is the game camera, and one is a wider shot, so you can kind of go back and forth between the 2 of them. It is not optimum. It is harder, but to be honest with you, you just do it. You do the best you can. You just do it. And by and large, you as a broadcaster are more critical and think you did a poorer job than other people do. When Millen and I got out of there, we said, well, that was not the best game we've ever done, but we got through it. It was okay. And then people, when we got to the ring, they go, what are you guys doing here? I said, what do you mean what we're doing here? Well, we thought you guys were doing the game in Sweden. He said, well, no, we weren't there live. Oh, really? I thought you were there. So, we ended up realizing that people who were watching it, they weren't as critical of our performance as we were. And they couldn't tell that we weren't actually there until we were right in front of them getting popcorn in the press box in Toronto. So the good news there is I got paid twice in the same day. Remember, what do we say?
That's right.
In team, but right. There's 2 in invoice. That's
right. That's true. Yeah. So, but and really, that has to feel great for you as a broadcaster when you have people tell you that oh, you were great, you sounded great. How was Sweden? Oh, well, I wasn't there. I was out in Toronto. That's really amazing, and it just shows that you obviously did an exemplary job. So, really, really good stuff. And
yes, but you know what? I'll just cut you off a little second there. Kind of yes, kind of no. In that, while you appreciate people saying nice things to you, everybody does. That's human nature. So far in my career, in person, face to face, not on social media or behind some anonymous, icon. People, by and large, don't tell you when you suck.
Right.
No one comes up to you and go, "Hey, Dean, saw you guys this afternoon. You and Millsy, you know what? You guys probably about a 65% game for you guys. You guys, there's that one part during the second period where you guys just sucked." Like no one ever does that. So if we did suck, no one would tell us anyway.
Unless you're on Twitter.
Yes, that's what I mean, on social. But then even with that, you can never tell whether that's real or not, because the people whose opinion you would actually think mattered wouldn't do that, first of all. And anybody who does do that, 96.4% of them are people who use a fake name and a picture or no picture. And so their criticism is not credible. If you're not willing to put your name, face, and job out there in the public before you make a comment, I really don't pay attention to you. Squiggly 965 with, a gurgle head as an icon. I don't care what they say on Twitter about me. Don't care. It's one of the things, if I had to ask the good people at Twitter one thing, if you want to eliminate a huge chunk of the acidity and the horrible things that are said in Twitter, is force every Twitter user to use their real name, their real picture, and where they work or go to school. If you have your education, your income, and your identity up on the block, people would behave completely differently. Yeah. Most of the people who are that way on Twitter are not that way in real life. Right. So if I had one day running Twitter, that would be the change I would make. No more anonymous, SpongeBob SquarePants icon and, Dipstick 908 for your name. I would cancel that immediately and say whatever you like, as long as, you meet the criteria for non-abusive language, but you have to say with everybody knowing who you are.
That's right. Yeah, it's true. It's the we've heard this heard this before, and you know what? I've asked this to a few broadcasters and even some young up and coming ones, some of my peers actually. And there is a broadcaster down here that works for CBS. Her name is Melanie Collins, and she made a good point. There was a tweet that she posted, and it said, quote, "Twitter is an absolute cesspool." And it was a response to someone who actually was kind of telling her that it wasn't really a good sideline job for her. So, and you brought up the perfect point where, you shouldn't care, and especially something like that, I just thought, and I don't know if you may agree or disagree, and I'd love to hear if you would agree or disagree. I thought that was the perfect thing where not only is Twitter beyond a cesspool, but you also have people that it doesn't really matter. It does not matter what they think, because it's, as you said, it's not going to affect your performance one way or the other.
No, and the other thing too is, if you look at Twitter, some of the most controversial, some of the most acidic, and some of the most stupid things that are on Twitter are people who have no clue what they're talking about.
Oh yeah.
They weren't players, they weren't coaches, they weren't managers. Right. They don't work in the business. They don't work in the game. They don't know about anything they're talking about. They have no expertise or education, but they have a keyboard and a bad attitude. That doesn't make you an expert in anything. Really, it doesn't. I've said to several of them, I said, with all you think you should get a job in hockey. You should try and find someone to hire you. With all you think you should get in the business. Then your opinion might have some weight, because it has none right now. But, if you really think you are this smart, to be smarter than a coach or a manager or a broadcaster or a player or whoever you think you're smarter than with all these comments, come on, get in the business. Come on and join, see how you do. See how you do against people who actually do it for a living and who actually do know what they're doing, and just see how you make out. None of them do. None of them have a response to that. You old baby boomers, what are you, you just want to keep your job and you're old and stupid and anyway, my mom's calling. My Cheetos are ready. It's a lot of the same responses. But
it's true.
If you look at Twitter, most of the really egregious stuff does not come from people with any credibility, by and large. And I love when fans get emotional, and I love when fans want to pour out about their team and want to talk and ask questions and all that stuff. But and that's great. I think that's when Twitter's at its best. But The other side of it, I think, is not worth taking part in. That's why I generally don't. I block a lot of people. I have a criteria. If you use swears, gonzo.
Yeah.
If anybody says stick to sports, gonzo. I'm a person who has a brain that works in more than just sports. If I have an opinion and you don't like it, unfollow, because I'm going to unfollow you right now with a block.
Yeah.
And just anybody who says, what's that saying? You bet, boomer, whatever it is. I forget this. Whatever, boomer, whatever.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Anybody who starts with a comment like that, who basically dismisses anything I might say because I'm older than you think someone should be and still work in the business, that disqualifies you too. That's just ageism is just pointing out that you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But the problem is, one of the problems, I have several friends in the business, I'm sure you do too, who have tried to quit Twitter. I'm just not going to be on it. And they find out that you can't. And in our business, you can't, because all the entire league and all the teams communicate with the media through Twitter. We get notifications of press conferences, injuries. We get all of that from the teams on Twitter. That's how they communicate with us. So it really isn't an option for anybody in our business to not be on Twitter. If you want to keep up to date, for example, in a game when a player leaves the ice with an injury, we get an update from the team on Twitter. Now, it doesn't go out to everybody. They have a dedicated list of who they send it to. But during the game, we'll be calling the game, and my phone will go off, and I'll just say, well, we've just learned that Bill Smixby is sustained a lower body injury, which we saw in period number 2, and he will not be returning tonight. I get that information from whatever team's media relations department on Twitter from the locker room. They're down there with the team docs and say, no, he's not going back in. So they just basically get on the list, tweet out to whoever's on that list, not coming back or is coming back or whatever. So for us, it really isn't an option to not be on Twitter. What you stayed for and what you're willing to endure on the rest of Twitter is totally up to you. And I like some of the great guys, like in our business, Bob McKenzie has over 1 million Twitter followers in hockey. And Bob's the kind of guy that very secure and understands that he has to do a lot to get in trouble with his bosses. He sets a great standard when with some of these. I remember one day when some guy was talking to Bob, I don't even know what it was about. And the guy was behaving like he was Bob's equal in hockey knowledge, which
far from that.
Ridiculous. And so Bob just called him an asshat. Get off that, you're gone. Now, there was a time in our business where you would have people above us saying, listen, every listener, every viewer, that's a client, that's a customer. You got to think of them that way. And that has changed. Twitter and social media has changed all that, because there's lots of bosses now who say, you know what? Tweets, texts, social media stuff, that's a prop for your show. Use it however you want. And don't worry about making the person mad at you. We don't care, because they don't care how they treat us or how they portray us. So don't worry about it. So that is kind of a bit of the environment has changed, but it's also changed, I think, for a lot of us. When you see the giants of the business like Bob McKenzie react to somebody like that, it's okay to tell some of these people just to beat it. You're an idiot, get lost, Not everybody, but the ones who really deserve it. Don't feel bad. Don't feel that you have to, get in there and try and massage them and get them to like you. Don't worry about it. If somebody's being a dip, adios.
Yeah, it's true. It's so difficult, especially when you're younger. You got to learn, and eventually people will learn. But it takes time and maturity, as we had said earlier. Now, Dean, let's head into the final 5 minutes of the third period here of our little conversation here. So, we spoke earlier about Netflix and about some of the projects that have a little bit of a asterisk for incomplete there for now. But during these uncertain times, Dean, we have some people that are, it takes a mental toll to them to be locked in, to be sheltered in place, as they say out in California or here in New York, pause. Whatever it was, things are slowly beginning to open up. But obviously, months ago, back in March and April, you're told to stay inside. The only time you could really go outside is for a run, or to the supermarket, wherever. So, as an aspiring broadcaster, now that you are one, and obviously, that really was not where you started off, but now think of yourself as a younger kid. What would be your advice to that person who has a lot of, let's say, or has developed some sort of mental issue because they can't go out there, they can't call a game for even a high school game or whatever the case may be, or even an athlete who does not have the proper facilities to go work out or to practice their voice, whatever the case may be?
Well, I think one of the things that, it affects athletes and aspiring broadcasters is really no different than a lot of other people in what would be considered, I guess, regular jobs. If you feel those things are really twisting you up, my first recommendation would be to talk to a professional, and I'm being serious. I think in athletics, in the business, as an athlete, or in broadcasting, or anything revolving around it, there has been for too long been this attitude that you can't show weakness, you can't show illness, and you have to be all right. You're all right, right? You're all right? No. Well, it's okay to not be all right. And it's okay to make sure that you talk to people who can help you with that. And you can do that over the phone. But first thing I would say to them is forget about worrying about broadcasting your next game, or how is training going in your basement if you're an athlete. If you're feeling those feelings, you should talk to somebody who's a professional. If your ankle was bugging you, you talk to a professional. So take advantage of those things and just continue to end the stigma in sports and athletics that we all should overcome. Whatever you have going on with yourself, you should be able to overcome that, or you're just not tough. Have some internal, be mentally tough. Hold on. There's a huge difference between being mentally tough and, inside, take care of it yourself, and getting the help from professionals who do this for a living to help you get by that. There's nothing weak about that. There's nothing weak about that. So that would be my first thing. For a broadcaster, I'm not going to tell an athlete how to keep getting ready to be an athlete. But from the other side of it, the mechanics side of it, for any broadcaster in my job, I can't tell you how to be a color guy. I've never been one. But as a play-by-play person, the only thing that helps you get a job or to aspire to something is by doing it. And if you can't go to rinks to do it, there's lots of replays on TV. And if nothing else, just record yourself and just call games. Call games, call more games, practice, listen to people who do it professionally, try to figure out the things that they do that you don't do as well. Try to look at why they do certain things and incorporate that into your broadcast, but just do it. Keep doing it. And when you get to the point where you can go back in rinks, if you can't get a job volunteering or doing whatever to give you experience, then just pay your $6, go to the rink, sit in the back of the stands and take a microphone, tape yourself, and just call games. Nobody gets a job in broadcasting anymore if they don't have a tape to prove they've done it in some way, shape, or form. So the most important thing, my answer would be, is if you're having those things that you need to deal with, get some help dealing with them. After that, and you want to worry about moving ahead as a broadcaster, an aspiring broadcaster, find a way to do games. Find a way to call games. Find a way to evaluate yourself. Find a way to put it down on tape and work on that part. You don't get a job by not doing it.
Yeah. So with the last two questions here. Now, we listened to, again, as we were doing our research, on you and getting a little bit more of a background with you, you appeared on a podcast called The Voice Behind the Voice back in 2017. And there was a part, Dean, that you had discussed about where your interviewer asked you how many games you missed, and there was only 2 games that you had missed. And the reason being was because you had a little bit of a health issue, and that was of a burst appendix. Now, I got really a kick out of that story because of the parts that happened afterwards, where or they didn't take it out, or whatever it was. Give us a little bit of background of the games that you missed, but also because, again, as we said just a couple of seconds ago, during the uncertainty or during the trying times where there could be not only health problems, but also, in your sake, years ago, physical health problems.
Yeah, I think I've missed since 1992, the first hockey broadcast. I have missed, I think, 4 games.
It's amazing.
Maybe 5 games. One was when my son was born. I was in Buffalo, and I got the call literally in the broadcast booth from my wife saying, "You want to see this baby get born, you better get home." So basically, I told Gord, my partner, I said, I got to go. Kid's being born right now, so I got to track. And he said, okay. So I was going down in the elevator, and Lance Pitlick was a defenseman on the team. He was injured. I passed him in the elevator, and I said, so he wasn't playing. I said, if you're looking for something to do, Gord could use a color guy because I'm leaving because I'm having a baby right now. And he said, are you kidding me? So Lance Pitlick actually went up and did the broadcast. I got downstairs, and the guy who was our bus driver, Teddy, I said, Teddy, I have to find a way to get to Ottawa like right now. He said, well, we're in Buffalo, New York. There's no planes that leaving here. So he said, we got to get you to Toronto to get a plane to Ottawa. He said, I can't leave. He said, give me a minute. I said, oh, okay. So literally he comes back 2 minutes later. He said, it's going to be a limo here in 2 minutes. Because it turns out at that time, the gentleman, the family that owned the Buffalo Sabres, they were at their place in Florida, and his limo driver was a full-time employee. So he always had the limo, and he was always on call. So Teddy called him and said, sure, I'll be there. So the Buffalo Sabres owner's limo driver brought the limo, picked me up, drove me to Toronto. I called in the limo on the way there, booked a ticket, Toronto to Ottawa, told them what it was. They held the plane for me. The concierge was actually waiting at the curb for me, and we ran to the air because they held the plane, I think, 10 minutes for me. Anyway, I got there in time. So that was one game I missed. I missed 2 games when my father died because I was back in Manitoba, so I had to go back for that. And I missed 2 games when my appendix ruptured. So yeah, that's 5. So I've missed a grand total of 5 games so far. And my appendix actually ruptured twice. I know people make that face. So the first time I was in Washington, and I just really didn't feel very well.
Yeah.
I have the benefit and the curse of when I broke my back, I suffered nerve damage. So I don't feel pain in the same way a lot of people do.
Right.
So I understand people saying, well, listen, if his appendix really ruptured, he'd be on the ground writhing in pain. I understand that, but that wasn't the case with me. So I called my doctor because he was actually a personal friend of mine from Washington and said, Mark, I'm doing the game tonight, but man, I got to tell you, I feel really bad. And he said, well, when you land, just come to my house. He said, I only live like 3 minutes away from the airport. Just come to my house. And I said, well, Mark, that's going to be like at 1:30 in the morning. He said, it doesn't matter. So I drove to his house after the plane landed, got to his house, said, lie down on the floor. He's checking. He says, okay, get up. I said, okay, what do I do? He says, leave your car here, come with me, going to the hospital. Oh, okay. So went to the hospital, and my appendix had ruptured. But so there's pods of poison, when they do the scan, there's pods of poison floating around everywhere. And when your appendix ruptures, by and large, and I only learned this at the time, by and large, you have about an hour and a half before it can kill you because it becomes a staph infection. Right. And that's why they rush you to the hospital. Yeah. But it turns out, talk about being the luckiest guy, turns out in 1% of the cases, the body has the ability to capsulize the infection. So mine was free floating, and they said, we don't want to go in now because if we open it up, that could cause the staph infection. So let's just monitor them. And so they put me in a room, and basically I was getting scans every 6 hours, and it started to capsulize. So basically I was in the hospital for, I think, 4 or 5 days until basically, and they were giving me these super antibiotics, and I don't even know what they were, but like they were hardcore. Anyway, so basically after, 5 days, 6 days, they did the last one and said, it's all been capsulized and it's gone. So the doctors came in and said, listen, after the season's over, you're fine for now. After the season's over, should really go see the surgeon and have it taken out. Yeah. So I went back to see the surgeon in the off season, and he said, you know what? He said, the chances of someone rupturing their appendix twice is next to impossible. Like it can't happen because the number of people who can capsulize the infection, so that's like 1%. So the chances that a 1%er would rupture their appendix again is like, next to nothing. So he said, we're just going to leave it there. And everything's been fine for the last couple of months. Just go on your way. About a year and a half later, 2 years, a year and a half later, during the off season, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm going, oh, whoa. So I said, Sue, we should go to the hospital. She said, why? What? And I think she was thinking like heart attack. What's going on? Yeah. I said, I think my appendix is ruptured again. She said, really? I said, yeah. So I went to the hospital, seeing the triage nurse, and she says, what seemed to be the problem, Mr. Brown? I said, well, I'm quite certain that I have ruptured my appendix. And she said, oh, really? and you're not in any. I said, no, it hurts. She said, Mr. Brown, generally, if you rupture your appendix, you would be in a great deal of pain. I said, I know, but I said, I'm not, but I'm quite certain that I've ruptured them. And she said, why are you quite sure? I said, well, because I've ruptured them before and it feels like that again. She goes, so you think you've ruptured your appendix before already? So I go, yeah, I have. And she goes, okay. So anyway, then I go back, they do a scan. And before we're even back, because the scans go from the radiology room or wherever they do them to.
Right.
So we haven't even got back to the waiting room yet. And the doctor said, get to the room, take your clothes off. It's ruptured. So basically, I was in the hospital for 42 hours, couldn't eat or drink because they were waiting to figure out if they were going to do surgery. Because again, it's everywhere. It's floating everywhere. And there was a shading on my bowel, and they didn't know if that was an opening or whether that was just a shade. If it's an opening, they were terrified to open me up because then the infection could get into my bowel and the staph infection would kill me. So it ended up again, I was in the hospital for I don't know how many days, but again, I capsulized, but they said this time it's coming out. So I don't know how many weeks later, 4 weeks later, I go into the hospital and they take it out. The surgeon says, listen, we're going to go in and it'll just be 3 holes in your abdomen. And he said, because you already had one before, it could be kind of funky in there and all welded together. So if that happens, we'll have to go old school and just a little 2-inch incision over here and we'll take care of it. So I wake up in the recovery room and I've got a 10-inch incision and 31 staples in my stomach coming right up my belly button. I'm going, what? So it turns out it was all welded together. And they had to get 2 doctors to do it, a separate set of hands to separate everything, and another guy to take it out. So they had to make an incision big enough for both of them to get their hands in. So that was kind of the end of it. And now I have to have surgery again because I didn't realize that incision hernias are very, very normal. And apparently now I have one. It's kind of like having a fanny pack right in your stomach there. So, and because of the COVID thing, I can't have surgery. My day's been pushed back and back and back. So
yeah,
it's the appendix that never stops giving.
Unbelievable. So you know what? So really, there is a good excuse for not excessive work or anything like that because you got a fanny pack in your stomach, and that really, you can't use a drill, can't use anything. You got to leave it all alone. And
can't lift everything. I say to my son all the time when he has this discussion about how many days you miss, he said, Connor, I'm not Superman. I get sick just like everybody else. But I said, to be honest with you, just a lesson in life. I said, it's about motivation. I grew up in a farming community. When it's harvest time, if a farmer gets sick, he doesn't stay in bed. You take whatever you have to take to get through the day and you suck it up and you go and do it because that's what you do. Well, it's the same in our business. Like I said, we get paid by the game. If I don't go to the game, I don't get paid. So I told Connor, when you're getting paid by the game, you will be amazed what you're willing to work through. So, it's one of those things where I'm not Superman, I'm not anything, but when you get paid by the game, doesn't matter how many colds you have or how bad you feel, by and large, you get up and you go do it.
Yeah, that's true. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Ottawa Senators radio voice on TSN 1200 in Ottawa, Ontario, Dean Brown. Dean, thank you so much for joining me here on this Monday night, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure all of our guests here appreciate it, and you are the first guest on season number 2 of this fantastic interview series. And again, as we said earlier, and actually, I forgot to mention earlier, Brendan Batchelor from the Vancouver Canucks on Sportsnet 650. He was also on there. So actually, you're number 5. So that is my poor mistake. You see, being a broadcaster, there's no math skills up here. So I do apologize.
But I'd like to point out that I am the first one on Streamyard.
That is true. There you go. Exactly.
So take a double XL t-shirt.
There you go. I love it. That's great. Dean, thank you so much again, man. I really appreciate it. And you stay healthy, you stay safe, and I hope to be in touch with you soon for sure.
Joey, it's been a pleasure. And if you're ever in a rink that I'm in, come over and say hi.
There's no doubt about it. Absolutely. Just one thing before you do go, we will like to announce on Thursday, we will be welcoming in Fox Sports broadcaster and the voice of Madden NFL 2021, Brandon Gaudin. He will be with us on Thursday night right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. Ladies and gentlemen, one last time, Dean Brown, I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us at the Blackjack Media Group, we'll see you next time.